Welcome to episode 41 of the Busted Buns Video Game Podcast, and we have a really fun podcast today. All episode long, we're going to go Zelda, and we're going to talk about Link's Awakening. We're going to talk about the story, the world, the dungeons, characters. Not a lot of characters, but I guess we are going to talk about them. Red made the outline. I don't know, but I did read the outline before we did this podcast episode. And then we're going to talk about the gameplay, and also we're going to talk about the different versions. We had the black and white, the DX, and then also the Switch remake. We're not going to do different episodes for those games. They're all pretty similar with some differences here and there. So we're going to kind of just combine it all into this episode. But first of all, some general info on Link's Awakening. The game was released in 1993 for the original Game Boy. And like I said, it was in black and white. Then the DX version came out in 98. Switch remake was in 2009. And overall, it's been critically acclaimed.
2019.
What did I say, 2009?
Yeah, I don't think the Switch was around.
That's only 10 years off. That's not the, it's not, it's just a generation. It's just a generation in gaming, so it's not that far off. But good catch. I'm glad you said something actually. But it is critically acclaimed. All the versions have had really popular score or really high scores. Yep. And then really surprising, only sold around 10 million copies across all three versions. I'm really not sure the Zelda numbers and what they've sold, but I just thought I felt like that would be higher. So that was a little shocking. But anyways, Red, I know this is one of your favorite Zelda games, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you. Go ahead and start off talking about the story.
Well, before we jump into it, we do have to give a shout out to our patron or Patreon or whatever the heck it is.
Patron. It's patron through Patreon. I just say supporter now.
Our supporter, it was the Red Curtain on our Discord channel, actually suggested we talk about this game. And we've talked about various Zelda games. And of course, we've talked about Zelda in general over the years of TGPZ. But this is an all-time favorite of mine. Before even jumping into the story, this was one of those games that came along when 93, I was an 8-year-old, and playing this on road trips with the family is what, to me, cemented this game in my memory. And that nostalgic, looking back on it now, even after playing it for our YouTube channel, of course, and then playing the Switch remake, I still have those memories of playing it as a kid, going to sporting events, going to ball games, going to whatever with my parents, and just playing this on the original Game Boy, that big gray brick with its 4 AA batteries in black and white. It was
didn't last long at all,
no, it didn't.
Man.
And it was just such an amazing world. And it wasn't my very first Zelda game. That would have been Link to the Past, but it was. I played this pretty much immediately after that. And I'm and it really cemented that, okay, A Link to the Past wasn't a one-off Zelda game. This series is something I can get behind, even as a kid. Like I said, even as an 8-year-old kid. And so to me, this is a very special podcast because it is, in my opinion, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, handheld game of all time. And I know people are like, oh, the Switch is all handheld games now. So what about Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey or whatever? I'm like, nah, screw that.
Breath of the Wild, it's handheld, but it's not handheld in the regard of Link's Awakening. Right. Before we go to the story, now I actually want to say something. I don't have the same experiences as you had with this game, which is kind of disappointing. I never had a Game Boy growing up, so I didn't get to play this game actually until I moved into my first house. You remember that was only 10 years ago or something like that? So I only had actually, I did play on the Game Boy Color. So, I did it right there.
Now, that's crazy.
Yeah, at that time, the Wii was out. I don't believe the game was on the Wii. So, at that time, I believe the only way that you could play was still on the original Game Boy. But I just don't have the nostalgia with this game, which has always really been a bummer to me. And that's why I don't really think I hold it as high as you do. But still, overall, it's a very great game. I played it 2 or 3 times. But anyways, continue on with the story.
Yeah, so the story, it's a very simple story. Like so many games that we kind of single out to talk about, it's a very simple setup. Yep. It's a direct sequel to A Link to the Past, where Link is going out to explore some other lands. And his boat is destroyed in a storm. And he washes ashore at a place called Koholint Island. He's rescued by a girl named Marin, meets her father, Tarin. Nice play on Malin and Talon.
And one thing that I love about this game is that it's the same Link from Link to the Past and who cares about the Oracle games? But it's the same Link in that one too as it is in this game. So Link to the Past being so high for us, I've always thought it's cool that we get the same incarnation of Link, I believe.
Yeah, it's the same version of Link. Like I said, it's just after he finish A Link to the Past. Like he did his Oracle adventures. He did this adventure. And
just stay in Hyrule, dude. Things ain't going good for you going out of Hyrule, man.
Things didn't do well anywhere else for him. But like you wash up on this island, you're rescued, and you're told by a mysterious owl that to escape the island, you have to wake up the Windfish. And so your entire quest is collecting 8 instruments of the sirens so you can wake the Windfish. And, like I said, on the surface, it sounds very simple, but it's just, this game did such an amazing job of, as you progress through it, it keeps hinting more and more that things on the island, on Koholint Island, aren't what they seemed. Like you keep hearing these hints that, hey, this is all, if the Windfish wakes up, we're all screwed. You're screwed. Like everything disappears. And sorry, spoiler alert for a game from 1993.
Oh, yeah. Man, all day I was sitting here saying we need to remember the spoiler up front, and we forgot again.
Right. So all throughout the game, though, you keep getting these hints, and they get stronger and stronger that this whole island is just a dream. And it's the Windfish's dream. And if you wake up the Windfish, it all disappears. I mean, you hear this from the bosses that you fight, who are actually called nightmares in this game, which I thought was a cool touch, like calling them something a little different. I was a big fan of that. You start reading it from, like some of the signs and the murals in the game. And then, of course, the owl itself that you keep talking to, he's like, hey, gotta wake up the Windfish, gotta wake up the Windfish. And as the game progresses, you just get this sense more and more that, this whole thing is a dream. And when it makes it, and some of our fans and writers have been like, and Discord participants have been like, it's a shockingly underrated game because in terms of its darkness, because you build this relationship with these characters, especially Marin, who I thought was a great side character. And we'll talk about her in the characters section a little bit more. But you realize that when you beat the game, it's all gone. The whole thing and everyone will disappear, but it's the only way that Link can wake up too and go home. So it was a simple story at the beginning. Like I said, it's like Castaway. His ship got fucked up by a storm and he washes up on an island. Only, he has at least real people instead of Wilson the beach ball like in Castaway. But
they're not real people. They're in a dream.
That's true. They're dream people. That's a great point. So I thought the story was simple, but takes such a dark and kind of sad, melancholy type turn. So what were your thoughts, though? I know there's a lot more. Okay, it's a Game Boy game. There's not a lot more to this story. But
I wonder when Nintendo was developing this game, if they really thought that people were going to look at this dark as they do, because they might just say, "Oh, we're going to make it a dream," and really didn't understand like the darkness behind it. I think with Majora's Mask, they just had some fucked up shit on their mind.
Oh yeah, they did.
I always wonder with this game if they meant for it to be that dark, and maybe if it was just interpreted in a different way. We know that happens in gaming, but overall the story was very simple, like you said. But I just love going around like here's what I love is that you go around collecting these instruments to wake this Windfish. Like, that's just such a unique concept, really, for a storyline. Like, you don't get storylines like this in Zelda or in other games, really. So I've never heard this concept being done. I'm sure it has somewhere in gaming and with the 50,000 indie games that are out there. But basically, hey, get these instruments to play a song to wake this Windfish, and then poof, everything's gone. So it's just such a unique story. And really, I mean, like I said, the Marin and Link on the beach, like right there wasn't much to that. It was actually a longer conversation in that particular game, but as we look at gaming nowadays, it was not really that long of a conversation. But when you go back and you look at Zelda as a whole, that scene is really so memorable across all the games. And just it goes to show that you don't really have to have a lot of text, Cyberpunk. You got too much damn text in your game, Cyberpunk. I get tired of reading all this shit in games. I understand people like reading stuff, but damn, like, I mean, at a game, when a game begins, I want an option of difficulty, and then I want an option of how much fucking text I gotta read in the game. God,
we'll never go back and play Planescape Torment. It's an old computer game that is like, it is known for like the novel's worth of text and like dialogue that they wrote for it. But I'm really glad that you mentioned like the beach scene, the quote unquote date that Link has with Marin, because to me, it's early on in the game. I think it's after like the third dungeon. And like it's early on enough, but she talks a little bit about wanting to know what's beyond the island and what's out there across the sea. And like she's one of the few characters on Koholint Island that expresses a desire to kind of know what's out there, out in the world.
She's
and
really the only character that really expresses anything, to be honest with you.
You're right. And it was such a great scene because, poor Link, of course, throughout the series, he's had his moments with Zelda and several other, like Ilya and Twilight Princess. Like, he's had kind of like those romantic interests, but they never really, they either don't explicitly state that there's a romantic interest or that they leave it very ambiguous, one or the other.
It means more if there is a relationship with Zelda or the girl main character or side character, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. So I liked with Marin, like even the game mentions like, Marin has decided to come with you. Is this your big chance? Even the game like kind of pokes some fun at it. And, and this was so early in the series, but as it went on, you get hints here and there of a Link Zelda relationship in every game. Sometimes it's more friendly. Sometimes it's more like brother sister type thing. Sometimes it is more, romantic. But this was one instance where like they made it very clear, like Marin and Link had this connection. And like that beach scene where she expresses her interest of like what's out there. I wish I was a seagull. I could fly and see what's out there beyond the world or beyond Koholint Island, I should say. And the music that went with that scene is just such a simple version of the Ballad of the Windfish that just was like, it was perfect for the scene. So I'm really glad you brought up that scene. And then one other scene that I really loved on the story, and I promise I'll let you talk again. I feel like I've been rambling. I was going to say,
I wasn't done talking the last time, but
I'll go and tag you back in. But so the other scene that I really loved was right before you do the Face Shrine dungeon. You go into a room where you see this inscription, again, with amazing music to match it, where it straight up says, it's all a dream. And like, that's the first time that they like explicitly come, like I said, everyone's hinted at it. A lot of people have hinted at it, but that's the first time it explicitly comes out and says it's all just a dream. And then you come out of there and the owl's like, that's what it says, but no one really knows for sure. So for a simple story on a Game Boy, I thought it had a couple of those story beats, like the beach and that shrine, that were really, really powerful. And now I promise I will shut up and let you talk.
And that's not a lot of things that games do. Like if there's a certain ending or a surprise ending, they won't hit usually throughout the game. It'll usually just happen at the very end. And they could have done that in this game. They could have not said anything the entire way, and then bam, okay, it's a dream. But I love that they did hit that because it kind of made you wonder, okay, you're playing the game and you're kind of like, what is this world? Is this actually a world that is real, or is it a dream? And you're kind of wondering that at the beginning, and then as you play more and more, you start getting these hints, and I actually think it makes you think more because you think, okay, is it actually a dream or is it not a dream? So I think maybe in a way it makes you more confused than, if you didn't get any hints at all. And I'm not going to go and explain that whole philosophy behind that because I don't even know if that made sense myself. But anyway.
I get where you're going.
But I love that they did hint it throughout the game because it just makes you think. And you might have a strong opinion of something, and then you might get some information, and then you start questioning yourself. We see that happen to us all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think there was when I first played this game and I didn't really know the ending. Somehow I waited 20 years to play the game. I still didn't know the ending.
That's impressive.
Yeah, but as I was going through the game, I was like, wait, is this? I thought I heard this was a dream, but now I'm confused. Now I'm not sure. So good job to Nintendo on making all that happen right there. But really, that's all the story. Like we said, a very, very simple story. Yep. So let's kind of go on and let's talk about the world. The world in terms of Zelda size is not very big, but in terms of Game Boy size, it is absolutely humongous. And I think that's why Zelda's so great, because Zelda stretches the limits. Like you look back to the original Legend of Zelda on Nintendo, like look how big that game was compared to other games. And it even had a save state. So once again, with the Zelda game, and I know that's one of Nintendo's main properties, but they took this game, they put it on the Game Boy, which the original Game Boy did not have that much power, did not have a huge screen, and they made this gigantic world in terms of that device, and it just keeps on pushing Zelda, and that's still what we expect with it to this day. Absolutely. As we kind of saw with Breath of the Wild. Now, that's not the biggest game world. I don't think it's the biggest game world, but it's still, in terms of Zelda and overall open game worlds, it is Breath of the Wild is a pretty big game. So, this is one thing that makes me upset is, not playing this game back in the day, one of the main issues that you had, playing games in the 80s and 90s is that you could beat them fairly quick. You go back and Link to the Past now, the first playthrough, you didn't know what you were doing, but like, if you did, it was like a 3 or 4 hour game. So it might take you a long time the first time to beat it, but that second playthrough is going to be like 6 or 7 hours. So that's why I kind of got, frustrated because like not playing this game because there's so many games that are short on the Nintendo and the SNES. Yeah. And here's a game that is just gigantic, and I didn't get to play it back in the day, and it's one of those things. I don't think I really would have wanted to play it in black and white, but definitely on the Game Boy Color and the DX version, that is one that I definitely would want to play, and I played it 10 years ago, like I said, and I still enjoyed it. But anyways.
It holds up well.
Yeah, just an awesome mix of regions. You got the forest, swamp, desert, mountains, plains, rivers, lakes. You got 2 towns. You got Mabe Village and Animal Village. And here's one thing that is great about this game is a lot of the places, not all the dungeons, not all the places, but a lot of them had their own music. And that's not even something that we saw in Link to the Past. So having all these areas, which geographically, this really doesn't make sense how all these areas are so close together. But that's one of those realist things that I'm okay with sacrificing on my games because Breath of the Wild map, that doesn't make sense either. How you have a desert right beside a snow area. So, geographically it doesn't make sense, but I can sacrifice that and just having like I said, once again, a very, not a small game, but a smaller game on a small device compared to other gaming standards, and you were still able to put all these regions in there. It just mixed it up so well, and we talk about this game and the world and everything else. On the Game Boy, this was definitely one of the best games. How do you feel about the overall world?
Oh, dude, I was a huge fan, and because you're absolutely right, it did feel huge for its time. And I know that, yes, you're right. It doesn't make any sense to have all these geographical features right there on top of each other. But getting all of that into one Game Boy world it made the world feel huge because, like you said, you got the mysterious forest, the swamp, the mountain. How about the music in Tall Heights, by the way? Or Tall Heights, however it's pronounced. Dude, I'm really glad you mentioned that because each region almost every region, not all of them, but having its own distinct music, it really helped it feel like its own special areas. Like you have that village theme, you have a little bit of the overworld theme when you're out in the plains areas.
And Animal Village's theme was so different from the rest of the game. Right.
And then, like I said, Tall Heights music was unbelievable. The dungeons, like you said, had their unique themes. Almost all of them had unique, but not all.
I'm not exactly sure on that, but there were some that were definitely
different. Of them had some very different ones. So for me, it was a great game world. I liked that they kind of took the idea from Link to the Past where the world was kind of gated by you needed certain items to get to certain parts of the world.
I hate those blocked out squares on the map though, man. I mean, it's kind of cool when you kind of, open them and you see more of the area, but it drives me nuts. Like OCD entirely throughout the game. Just I want to know what's behind that block. So yeah, it's kind of cool and it's a surprise, but I do not like that.
I'm kind of with you there because I'm with you. I get that OCD feeling that I'm I need to uncover all those squares on the map. And in a game like this, now that we're grown up and we've played it many times, it's not hard to do that now. But when you're playing it as a kid, like I did as an 8-year-old, I'm like, what is over there? I don't know how to get there. The mountains looked massive because of all the tunnels in and out. It felt so big at the time, and having it gated off where you couldn't get to certain areas until you beat certain dungeons. And they took that, of course, from Link to the Past. Really introduced that for Zelda games. The original Zelda, you could wander just about anywhere you wanted to. Mm-hmm. You might get your ass beat, but you could go wherever you wanted.
If they would did that with Link's Awakening, it would have been too complex. We get that a lot with the original Zelda. Yes, it's a great game, but damn, it is really confusing because you can waste a lot of time going to different places that aren't important. So people talk about, I want to have freedom and blah, blah. I do like this concept where it's a little bit by a little bit because it keeps you confined to an area.
Yep.
And you don't go all the way north trying to figure out something that's not entirely there. So I did like that part of it.
I'm with you too. And speaking of the areas being gated by dungeon items, I think it's a great time to dig into the dungeons. And to be completely honest, this almost felt like a game of before we go on, is there anything else on the world that you really wanted to hit on? Okay, I figure the world, it's pretty basic by today's standards. At the time, it was mind blowing, but it's just having all those geographical features was great. But the dungeons, it was almost like a story of two separate games because I would say the first 5 or even 6 dungeons in Link's Awakening were simple.
Yes.
In my opinion, they were not difficult. I mean, they gradually get a little tougher, don't get me wrong, but it's when you hit that 7th and 8th dungeon, you get to Eagle's Tower and Turtle Rock, that it feels like the difficulty takes a massive spike in terms of the confusion and what you have to do to get through these dungeons. Did you feel that same way going through the dungeons?
Yes, I mean, I actually love that there was 8 dungeons in this game. You know,
Right.
I'm not gonna lie, I zoned out, I didn't even hear your question. But anyways, what'd you ask again?
I was asking if you also felt that, like, after those first 5 or 6, like, the spike in difficulty.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, here's one concept of why that's true. Eagle's Tower is the first one with multiple floors. Like, up
Right,
until that
right.
point, like, you just had one floor, and that's why I hate the Oracle games so much, man, because their dungeons are just, in my opinion, they're too complex. Now, I know a lot of people love that, but, like, you know, Oracle games, like, pretty much you had multiple floors pretty early in the game, but with
Right.
Link's Awakening, you know, like you said, the first 5 dungeons, no, it's not that, no, it's first 6. The first 6 dungeons, where I believe were one floor or
Pretty
close.
sure, yep.
And then you get to Eagle's Tower, which, my God, man, that place
Now
up
you
at
got
the
4
top
floors.
right, you see the ocean in the background. That shot right there is just awesome. But yeah, those last 2 dungeons, to answer your question now, eventually, after I had to tell you that. But here's the problem. I already had where I was going, and then you asked a question, and so I wasn't really ready for that question. But yeah, the 7th and 8th dungeon, they are definitely much more difficult, but I like that. Like, I don't really like tough dungeons like up front now. They probably could have did it like a little bit earlier than 7. Like, you know, maybe like the 3rd or 4th one, even though I think Key Cavern, it can be difficult. I'm not, it reminds
a lot
me
of fucking
of the
keys
Water
in
Temple.
Key
Like, you
Cavern.
always have one damn key that you're forgetting, but
Yep.
I don't know. I kind of, it make the game easy, and sometimes I like that. Like, you know, have good puzzles, but don't make the game too, like, difficult. In this game, was great about doing that. So, but you know, it made in my opinion, it made Eagle's Tower and Turtle Rock stand out, you know, quite a bit more. Now, one thing I hate is that they named it Turtle Rock. Like, that's such a cop off of Link to the Past, and then also was the last dungeon
Legend of Zelda,
in the game, which kind of Link to the Past. I guess you could count Ganon's Tower after that as that's definitely a dungeon, but you know, close to the end of the game. So I did not like that they used Turtle Rock. I do not understand that. I think the whole game was unique. I think they could have done something completely different. So, but overall, very challenging dungeon. Did enjoy, but do you kind of want to go through these one by one a little bit? Yeah, we will. We'll kind of do that. But like, you know, Tail Cave really right at the bat. Very, like I said, all these dungeons are kind of simple up front, but here's what we got to say. The Rock's Feather. Such
the Rock's
an
Feather.
incredible item in Zelda games. And I believe, I can't remember exactly because I'm looking at the outline right now. And you say it was only in this game. I want to say that it was actually in both Oracle games or one of the Oracle games. But I can't remember.
Oracle games aren't real Zelda games. They don't count.
They were made by Capcom. Who gives a shit? But I believe we might have gotten the Rock's Feather in Oracle games.
Maybe we did.
But overall, just such a cool item, and to get this early on in the game, that was really just awesome. And then the mini boss, actually, Rolling Bones, I did actually really like that boss. Just using the Rock Feather to jump over something. Like, and here's the thing. Back in those days, like, you know, Link to the Past, we didn't have the ability to jump.
Absolutely.
And so, or in the first 2 Zelda, well, actually in the second Zelda game, I think you did. But that game doesn't count either. The second Zelda game and the Oracle games, they do not count at all because we don't like them that much. But anyway.
I'd rather play the CDI games, but that's it.
No, you don't. No, don't you say that, all right? Because I've not played those games, but I've seen how bad they are.
Oh, I've heard they're terrible.
Just using this Rock's Feather to jump over and beat that boss, very cool. And then Moldorm, once again, kind of a cop-out. I think in a unique world, you have unique bosses. And we did see that throughout this game. But Moldorm really just too quick right there, right off the bat. You've already faced this boss right here. So I wasn't big on that overall. But why don't you go ahead and take us to Bottle Grotto?
Yeah, I mean, Tail Cave was simple. Bottle Grotto was too. I mean, like we said, these early bosses, or these early dungeons rather, were very easy.
Yeah.
I didn't like that the item was just like the power bracelet. And I know that that's something we've seen in almost every Zelda game, though. I mean, Link to the Past, you had the power mitt or the power glove, whatever it was called. Ocarina of Time, you had the golden gauntlets and the silver gauntlets. So I get it, but it's just the fact, and this is kind of getting into items, and we'll talk about this a little more in the gameplay section, but like having to equip things like the power bracelet was frustrating.
Yes.
It was just frustrating. But I will say, like, Bottle Grotto was simple. Hinox is an enemy that we had seen in Link to the Past. We saw them again as a huge mini-boss in Breath of the Wild. So I liked Hinox being a mini-boss. The genie was kind of a fun, unique fight. Like, you have to break his bottle open and then attack him. Like, to me, that's what you think of when you think of a dream world. It's a crazy, like, out of this world kind of boss. So it was not a difficult fight, but I enjoyed the concept of fighting the genie. And Hinox made sense because, hey, this Link had encountered one before, so it makes sense. It might pop up in his dream, so I get it. Key Cavern, you're absolutely right when you say it is an easy one, but it can get confusing because, as the name implies, holy hell, there are a lot of keys in this dungeon, and some of them are completely unnecessary to even beat the dungeon. So it's the first one that really does kind of confuse you a little bit. Like, there's a whole like area where you go into you unlock a door to get into a room, you get the key, use that key to unlock the room right next to it to get another key to unlock the room right next to it to get another. It's like it's pointless. It seems so pointless. But we bring back a boss from the previous game where we get the Dodongo snakes, which I believe we had seen in the original Legend of Zelda, right?
We had Dodongos like that were the dinosaurs.
You're right,
so these bosses, they were a little bit different, but it was still the same concept where he threw a bomb in their mouth. So, good, not exactly the same thing, but a good throwback to it. Now, see, I don't mind that. Something that's a good throwback, even though it's a dream world, but something that's exactly the same, I don't really care for. Now, the Pegasus boots. I'll tell you, man, that first room at the beginning of the dungeon, I think that was off to the right, where you had to use the Pegasus boots to hit that like magnet or wave thing or whatever that kept on pushing you off the platforms. It took me forever I had to look that up. I could not figure that one out. But overall, just not a dungeon that I'm very big on. And Slime Eye, I actually did like the boss because using the Pegasus boots to kind of tear him apart in the middle, then fight him. Cool. I really like that concept. It was really good use of the Pegasus boots. And then, so that's all we need to say about Key Cavern. But Angler's Tunnel, why don't you go ahead and talk about that one a little?
There's really only like two things I remember about Angler's Tunnel. I mean, don't get me wrong. I remember like the flippers and getting to dive in the water and all that was fun. But one, getting into Angler's Tunnel, I thought was really cool because you jump off Tal Heights down a waterfall, like 2 screens to land in front of the dungeon. I thought that was a really cool way to get into the dungeon.
Hard as fuck to figure out your first time through for some people, though. I can tell you that.
Well, you're not wrong there, because like I said, you have to use the key out in front of it, and then you have to climb Tal Heights and find where to jump off to get into the dungeon. So it could be confusing, absolutely the first time, but I thought it was fun and creative way to get into the dungeon.
Agreed.
The only other thing that sticks out to me from Angler's Tunnel is the boss. The anglerfish was probably hands down the easiest fucking boss in Zelda history. Like I'm even easier than like the first boss in any game, whatever. I don't care. Pick your poison. Anglerfish was so damn easy, and on my recording, I made it look way harder than it needed to be.
Did. I remember that.
It was not my finest recording when I was recording this gameplay just to have. But damn,
nothing ever goes the way you want it to go when you are recording game footage.
No, because you can legitimately beat anglerfish in like 10 seconds.
Yeah,
maybe. It is such an easy boss. But other than that, Angler's Tunnel was just kind of there. I love the entrance.
And I love the water look of it because you hadn't gotten that in the first 3 dungeons, and you get a little bit later on in some dungeons. But overall, that was the water dungeon of the game, and it really switched up the visuals of the game. So I did really like Angler's Tunnel for that. Now, Catfish's Maw, I actually don't think there was any water, or if there was, there's a very
little.
Yeah, I can't remember, to be honest with you. I know there was a lot of water getting to it, which is one of the, we kind of talk about Angler's Tunnel. I also like the entrance to Catfish's Maw, where you kind of had to go out in Martha's Bay and kind of swim under like a little rock or whatever to get in there. So I love that whole part. But then when you get in there, just kind of, not terrible dungeon, but at the same time, there's not a lot to it. But getting the hook shot, okay, the hook shot is awesome in any Zelda game. Once again, in this game, it made it so much funner going over gaps. Basically you can use against enemies, obviously. So absolutely love the item that we got. But the mini boss in this dungeon, this is what was special about Catfish's Maw, is having to beat the Master Stalfos 4 times. You go to 4 different rooms, and it kind of progresses, and then on the 4th time, you get the item, the hook shot. I just love how that all played out, because once again, it was unique.
It was just
so I
something
just
different.
love it being different from all the other mini bosses, and it stands out because of that reason. And I think he also maybe had some gomas in the dungeon. I'm not really sure.
There were some gomas. Yeah, there were a couple of little spider guys you had to kill with the bow. Well, the bow and arrow, or I think you could use your sword, because not everyone had the bow at this point. But.
And then the slime mill. Actually, I thought that was a very tough boss, because if y'all remember, use a hook shot to pull out its mouth in the 4 corners or whatever. But he had that tail spinning the whole time, and that tail could be quite a pain to dodge. I don't believe I ever really died on that boss, but overall, compared to the other bosses in the game, which I think would be one of our main complaints of this game, is that some of the bosses were just too damn easy. So Slime Mill, not incredibly difficult, but it did switch it up a little bit. And then we go on to, actually, you want to go ahead, because I know you love this game so much. Send us to the South Face Shrine, and then go into the actual dungeon.
Oh, man. Okay, the Face Shrine section of the game. I mentioned this talking about up in the story, but this is where I feel like the story of the game really took off. Like we said, you'd been getting the hints all along about what this island is. And we go to South Face Shrine, and I'm going to screw that up once or twice, but we go to South Face Shrine.
That's the beer, Red.
And it's the beer and just, being from, Southern Indiana. But, like working our way through there, and we go into that room. First of all, the little mini boss we fight in South Face Shrine was harder on the Switch version than I remember it being on the Game Boy version. I remember playing on the Switch version. I'm like, what the hell am I doing wrong? Why can I not get any kind of hit on this guy?
There was also a boss, I believe, in Canalet Castle that was incredible, a lot more difficult than I believe they were in the DX version.
No, it completely was. But man, you see the mural, or I think they call it a relief in this game. I'm not sure about all my art terms, so forgive me. But that's where you finally see the whole thing is a dream. And the music that's playing in the South Face Shrine is just amazing, haunting version of the Ballad of the Windfish. And it's just a really, really good theme and a powerful moment in the game. You walk out and the owl's like, hey, you saw this, but no one knows for sure until you wake up the Windfish. And then the North Face Shrine, it still kind of falls for me into those easier dungeon categories, but I really like the theme. The theme to this North Face Shrine was it's easily my favorite dungeon theme in Link's Awakening, and it was honestly one of my favorite in the entire series. I'm pretty sure it made my top 10 or top 15 when we did our YouTube video for our favorite dungeon themes. Face Shrine was absolutely in my list. It was just a very good theme, but again, you run into a boss that's so easy. You literally just set bombs on its face. Yeah. I mean, it's a giant face on the floor, which is a little too literal for the Face Shrine, if you ask me. But it's just an easy boss. But that entire part of the game was an amazing turning point in the game. Just the music in this area, the story beats that we get. And again, the dungeon and the boss itself were a little on the easier side. Yep. But man, just a great area. But speaking of great areas, I know one of your favorite areas in the game is around Eagle's Tower. So I'm going to throw it to you to tackle Eagle's Tower.
I am shocked that you actually threw it to me, because I thought you were going to go right into that one. Because
I
love that dungeon. I know how much you love that dungeon. But overall, first of all, we've talked about it already in this episode. But getting up there in the top right and seeing that view, just absolutely spectacular. And that dungeon looks amazing in the remake. It looks absolutely amazing.
Yes, it does.
Just love the dungeon because it was so different. The first one that had multiple floors in it, and just going around and getting those pillars to fall down to collapse the top part, that was a very difficult puzzle. And once again, it was very unique. And so this whole dungeon just stood out for that reason, because it was just so different from everything else in the game. And just, if you talk to anybody about Link's Awakening, I've not really heard of anybody ranking Eagle's Tower that low. It might not be their favorite one, but it's usually very high towards in the rankings. But first of all, you get the mini boss, Grim Creeper. And then I love how, you beat him, and then you see him later on when you fight another great boss, Evil. Yeah, I said that right. I don't know why I'm repeating myself. Well, I actually said it right the first time, but you
had it right.
Here's another thing that's great, is you go outside the dungeon, between I always love. And then you climb up to the top, and that's where you see Grim Creeper, and then the Evil Eagle comes in. Just that whole cinematic right there, bringing everything together, and find the boss outside, and then find the boss outside on a tower where there's not really that big of a platform. Just overall, an absolute amazing dungeon, a great mini boss, a great boss. The item, the mirror shield, take it or leave it in any Zelda game. I really don't really, shield. I don't really care for a shield that much. I don't do defense. I do offense, so get this and get out of my way. If I don't have to be an enemy with a shield, I'm not going to use it, but I will throw it to you right here because I know that you love Eagles Tower, so why don't you go ahead and give your opinions on it?
You hit it on the head. I absolutely loved it. Just the concept of knocking out those pillars and the cinematic you get when it shows the tower collapsing down a level was just a really cool moment.
Just the cinematics in general because you didn't get them in another dungeon.
Right. And you had that at the very beginning of the dungeon. You had the whole thing rotating 180 degrees so the entrance turned to face you. I mean, this was a dungeon that it really took, Game Boy did not have much in the way of cinematics. Let's be honest. It was a Game Boy. So getting little moments like that, fighting the boss with a side-scrolling view instead of the top-down view. And I know we'd had that before with the anglerfish, but getting to do it on top of the tower.
But it was the anglerfish. That's the problem.
You may not even know you're side-scrolling because you can beat him so quick.
Yeah.
But no, just so it really did all come together. And like we said, the spike in difficulty when you got to Eagles Tower, because finding all four pillars and carrying that giant cannonball-looking thing to all four pillars and having to take it up levels, drop it down levels, forgetting where the hell you left it.
I forgot about the cannonball. Yeah, that thing was awesome.
Dude, just using that to knock out the pillars was just such a fun concept. So I was a very, very huge fan of Eagles Tower. Easily #1 dungeon for me in this game. But I will say the finishing dungeon, I know we complained about the name and the concept Turtle Rock being recycled from the original Legend of Zelda and from Link to the Past. I love the entrance to Turtle Rock as well, where you had to fight a mini boss just to get into Turtle Rock. It is a giant dragon looking thing, or a turtle, let's be honest. Some kind of reptile that you had to kill.
I mean, I agree. I know what you're trying to say right there, because you don't think a turtle because I believe its neck stretched out, which turtles kind of do. But when he does that, he doesn't actually look like a turtle, in my opinion. So I get where you were going with that.
Right. But Turtle Rock is probably, in my mind, it's easily the biggest and probably the most confusing dungeon in the game, which I love that the challenge finally really ramped up when you get to Turtle Rock. And even Eagles Tower before that. But Turtle Rock, you're finally this is what I think of a confusing, big Zelda dungeon. At the time, of course. Nowadays you've got, everything else. But
I went back and watched our dungeon ranking today, and we actually had this at the second spot. So we were both shocked during the dungeon ranking video that it actually made it up that high. I had to eventually turn it off because we just sounded awful in our audio. We've learned a lot over the years, people, of how to do better audio. And we're still learning every single day. But I think we were just surprised, really, that it got that high. But go ahead.
I like the lava theme that went along with Turtle Rock. And that's, that carried over, of course, from Link to the Past.
Well, it's a lot like Mario. The last level of Mario always has a lot of fire, usually.
You gotta have, Bowser's Castle always has the fire. But the mini boss of this dungeon can just suck it. I hated Blano so much because one of his big punches would knock you all the way back to the beginning of the dungeon. You had to work your way all the way back to the mini boss and start the fight all over again. Once you see the pattern, you can avoid it pretty easily. But the problem is you hit him 4 or 5 times and then one of those punches and you're all the way back at the beginning of the dungeon. I liked some of the puzzles.
See, now I did hate that. I want to talk about Blano a little bit. Yeah, I agree with you. I did hate that part of him where he would make you go back to the start of the dungeon. But that was a cool mini boss, man. I mean, come on. Muhammad Ali. Now, he wasn't as good as Muhammad Ali, but just getting a boxing character in the game, I thought that was so cool. It was so fun. Yeah, it did suck when he hit you, but I was a fan just because of how cool of a concept it was.
It really was. And some of the puzzles in this dungeon, you had where you had to move the platforms to fill in all the lava, they could be complex, but they were also different from anything else we'd had in the game. So I was a fan of everything. It seemed like Turtle Rock threw at you with something that you really hadn't seen, and just it brought the game together well. The boss, can take it or leave it. I mean, it's fun using the magical rod, which I always call the fire rod from Link to the Past. Me too. The magical rod to beat Hothead, the boss. He was a pretty easy boss, all in all, which is a little disappointing for the dungeon. But do you have any other strong opinions on Turtle Rock?
No, that's it, really. I was disappointed in the boss also. I just expected so much more. Right. We kind of go to the Windfish's Egg. Not really a lot there. It's where you fight the final boss, Death, which I actually didn't know. Like, is that his real name?
Death Eye is how it's actually
Death
pronounced.
Eye. Okay. Like, when you put down the outline, I was like, I never knew that was his actual name. I always thought it was like the Shadow Nightmare, but I guess his versions are maybe called the Shadow Nightmares. I don't know.
I think the final form is called Death Eye. Like,
okay, well, Red put the outline together, so if he's wrong, get on him. But, basically a little maze, which what I love about it is that you actually had to get the instructions from the library in Mabe Village. And, once again, I had to look that one up. Because I never thought, I was like sitting there. And first of all, I just try to go random directions because I always think I can figure stuff out like this, knowing that I cannot figure shit out like this. Right. And so I was like, I'll go this way. There'll be some pattern I'll figure out. No. And so
2 hours later, you're still wandering.
Yeah, I'm sitting there. I'm like, what the hell do I do? And I guess, I don't read a lot. So, I wasn't going to go. I probably checked out the library, but I wasn't going to sit there and check out all the books. I wasn't going to read all the books. So I definitely missed that maze and how to go through it. So that was kind of cool right there. Before the internet, I don't know how much I would have appreciated that. But anyways, the final boss, we're not going to go through all the forms. He has he did Aghanim, which is a great throwback to Link to the Past.
That was a good throwback.
We had Moldorm, which we've already had in the fucking game. So first of all, you copied it, and then you did it again. So, but
could have done without Moldorm.
Yeah, gaining from Link to the Past, which I like, and then Leomola was a throwback to the Desert Palace and Link to the Past. But overall, I was a big fan of all the changing forms because each of them had a different attack that you had to go about, defeating him. So I really liked that. And you could say, okay, all final bosses, they are different as you go through. There are different phases where your attacks are different, but just the way they switched it up so quickly, you had to switch up your attacks quickly, and you had to figure all that stuff out very quickly. So overall, I was a big fan. What about you?
I like that they did bring back Aghanim and Ganon because once again, in their Link to the Past forms, well, of course, Link to the Past is the only game Aghanim has been in, but it is, again, it's a dream, and Link has experienced these things in real life. So it makes sense that he might see them. And I know, yes, it's the Windfish's dream, but maybe Link brought it, whatever. Or the nightmares are using Link's memory of these characters.
That's a whole nother podcast, man.
But that's a whole different can of worms. That's a theory video waiting to happen if we ever make YouTube videos again. But no, so I like you said, just fighting the shifting forms was a fun concept. It was something different. And just the whole maze concept of the egg was really cool. So I thought it was a fitting final boss fight. Death Eye, I thought was a fun final form, dodging his rotating arms and then attacking his eye when it opened. And just when it died, it was this is our world. And, it was a powerful moment there because the nightmares really wanted to control the dream and keep the Windfish awake so they could rule Koholint Island. So to finally defeat them and kind of free that grip on the Windfish was a good ending moment. I guess we have to spend a second talking about the color dungeon.
Yeah.
Ugh, it was there.
Yeah, I know you're not a big fan of it. I'm not really a fan of it either. I thought the color puzzles were pretty cool. Now, this was only for the DX version. Basically, a little, the salute to kind of being on the Game Boy Color and everything. So we're gonna put a little, it's a new version. We're going to put a little something extra in here. So I'm glad that they did do a little something extra. And I'm also glad that you could get a blue or a red tunic. One did defense, one did offense.
I like that.
But overall, the puzzles were okay. Some of the bosses in there were okay. But really, not much of a dungeon, not really something you think about. You mostly think about it for the tunics that you get, which do help you throughout the entire game. So I was appreciative of that. But
they were good
overall,
rewards.
I think really that sums up the dungeons, to be honest with you. So let's kind of go to the characters. Now, I know we've already talked about a lot of the characters so far, but
I think we've hit the characters pretty good. I mean, we talked about
Is there anybody
Link,
you want to talk
Owl.
about that you might have missed throughout there?
No, I loved the relationship between Link and Marin. I mean, I thought that, literally she is the girl of his dream. I mean, and I like how he calls
I like
her
the way
Zelda.
you put that there, Red.
Yeah, it's just so I like that relationship. I like, you got to go on the date and you could tell she was very interested in her whole character of being the one questioning what's beyond the island. I really liked her character. But other than that, that's all
Mr.
I really
White.
have.
I like Mr. White, the guy that would give you clues throughout the game in the telephone booth. I thought that was very cool. It kind of tell you which way you might need to go next.
Yep.
And then you eventually, I think you meet him somewhere and he's very shy. So I did love that character. I'm kind of going through some of the characters, and I think for the most part, we have mentioned the ones that we want to mention. So we'll kind of go to gameplay right here. First of all, and I know you love these kind of Zelda games, but a top-down Zelda game. Actually, you love it so much, you go ahead and talk about it.
It's what introduced me to Zelda, is the top-down Zelda game. So like A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening were the first two Zelda games I ever played. To me, that is what I think of when I think Legend of Zelda. Even going back years later and finally getting to experience the original Legend of Zelda, or like when we first got into doing this channel and we played A Link Between Worlds, like that top-down Zelda game still to me is what is the Legend of Zelda. And yes, the conversion to 3D with Ocarina of Time and everything since then has been done amazingly well. I mean, we've preached how well Nintendo converted this franchise, and like Mario and several others, to 3D. But to me,
here's the thing. I want to interrupt real quick.
Oh, yeah, okay. Go for it.
Like, it takes them so long to make a game that I would love to see new 2D games thrown in here and there. Like, we see it with Mario, like, side-scrolling. Yeah, you had 3D Mario games, but also these 2D Mario games had done very well. And I wish they did that with Zelda, where, yeah, the 3D games are awesome, but, I'll take a new 3D game, not an LA remake. That's not a new game, but give me a top-down Zelda game in between all your 3D games. Like, I would absolutely love that, but go ahead.
That's why I love Link Between Worlds. I mean, yes, it was like...
That game was awesome.
And again, still set in the same, like, world and general timeline as A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. Like that.
A different Link, though, in that game.
Different Link, you're right. But so to me, the only thing that was a real pain in the ass in terms of gameplay with Link's Awakening, and I hate to criticize it because I do love the game so much, is every single item and weapon had to be assigned to A or B. Yeah. And that included I know I mentioned earlier, like the magic bracelet to even lift heavy objects, the Pegasus boots to run fast. You had to equip your sword and shield if you wanted to A or B, and which was great because you could put some fun combinations together, like the Pegasus boots and the Rock's Feather would let you jump over huge gaps. The Pegasus boots and your sword was a fun combo. The Rock's Feather and your sword was a fun combo. So like it gave you flexibility on what you could do, but not having your sword and shield and the Pegasus boots and the magic bracelet mapped permanently kind of pissed me off, and it was a little bit of a pain. I don't think I realized how much of a pain it was until futures that, like, probably Ocarina of Time, where they're like, oh, the golden gauntlets, they're automatically equipped. They're equipped all the time. So and they fixed this on the Switch remake. They made the sword and shield like always.
Well, they had
equipped.
more buttons too. So that's the thing. Like the Game Boy, like, you kind of understand some of it because there weren't a lot of buttons. But like you said, you could have mapped it to that button. Like when you get close to the rock, just push A instead of using your sword. You'll use the bracelet. So they could have done better at that. And I completely agree. Switching back and forth between them was an absolute pain. But kind of talking about the Switch really, and like moving forward, like there's three versions of this game. There's the original version, black and white. There's a DX version, and then there's the remake. I want to kind of throw it to you on the original version right here because overall, I know you're a huge fan of this game. We've already said it, but where this game I think really sticks with you is that you originally played it in black and white, and that's got to be such a huge nostalgia factor for you.
It really is, and because it's hard to go back and play a game like that now. Like, especially if you've never played it before, but playing it, like I said, just in black and white on the crappy Game Boy screen where it wasn't even backlit. Like, if it was dark out, you ain't playing shit.
Yeah.
Or if you're in the car.
And that light that came with it sucked, too.
Oh, dude, that thing took 4 AA batteries, too.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
But no, so, like, I really appreciated playing it, getting to play it on the original version, because playing other Game Boy games at the time, like we said, this felt so big compared to that at the time. The color version, I don't think I played until we started doing this channel, and I was like, oh, I should probably go check this out and do the color dungeon and all that.
Not this channel, when we started Two Guys Playing Zelda, which was the original thing that we did, but go ahead.
Yeah, but Link's Awakening DX is the one you came in with, and kind of, it was, you didn't have anything to compare it to, I guess, but for me, I'm like, okay, the color was nice. The color dungeon was just meh, as we mentioned above. It's just like, to me, there wasn't a whole lot there, but then the Switch version came out and redid everything. What were your thoughts when you first fired up the Switch version?
I absolutely loved it. First of all, I know a lot of people have problems with the art style. I think the art style fit the game perfectly. So I was always a huge fan of that. Some people have an issue with the blur, like kind of like the outside blur. Take it or leave it, I think. I just played a game that kind of had that similar effect. Once again, with that game, take it or leave it. Like, I don't really know what the point of it. I guess the point of it is to focus on your character more and what exactly you're doing in that particular space.
It didn't bother me,
I'm kind of just on it, but I thought the remake, and we're just talking about this where we want more top-down Zelda games in between the 3D games. Now, yeah, this was not a new game, but it was great. It was great getting this in between Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2 when it comes out the same year as Detox. Some of you will get that joke. It was Dr. Dre's album that was supposed to come out a long time ago. Red and I used to always joke about it.
It's going to be 2030 before that shows up.
Yeah, but Breath of the Wild 2, they showed a trailer and did nothing for over a year.
Right.
But I was just a huge fan of this game. It really took me back to what 5 years earlier playing Link's Awakening for the first time. I really meant for that to go better than it really did. I kind of meant for it to go the way.
For me, it took me back to 1993. Yeah. For you, so I'm there with you.
That nostalgia factor worked for you, not for me. But I was, like I said, I was a huge fan of it. I like the art style. I love the colors. HD looked fantastic, and just the game was smooth. Now the original and the DX version, I never played the original. But the DX version, it was smooth, but this remake right here, Nintendo does this very well. Their games are very smooth. So just going to, you had the color version, but then you got the Switch remake, and this was colorful right here. I mean, the colors look better than they looked 20 years ago. On top of the colors,
the gameplay improvements were a massive jump forward. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Oh, actually, I was almost done, so you can kind of go ahead.
No, just the quality of life improvements, like we talked about. Just the mapping and the buttons was such a huge improvement.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. The colors and the art style match the world. They looked beautiful on the Switch. It's just a great game all in all. They added, and I guess we should mention, they added a dungeon maker. I didn't do shit with it. I never even touched it. It was you could only recycle rooms from previous dungeons, and you had to jump through some hoops to do it. Did you do anything with the dungeon maker?
No, I didn't do anything with it either. And the thing that's disappointing about the Dungeon Maker is that you couldn't share them online. The Dungeon Maker actually feels like the Wii U. Where the Wii U, you could kind of sit here and say, oh, that's just well, obviously it was the predecessor. That was a dumb assessment of it. But you could see with the Wii U that they were kind of thinking about the Switch concept. And that right there is, I forgot actually what I was talking about, to be honest with you.
There you go. I knew you'd get there eventually.
Yeah, actually, what was I even talking about? I forgot what I was talking about.
You're talking about the Dungeon Maker. Jesus.
Oh, Dungeon Maker. Okay. I think that, they wanted to make it bigger, but they kind of use that Wii U concept going into the Switch where they're like, hey, we're going to test this out a little bit. I'm
just
glad
test
you're here,
it
man,
out. Yeah.
Because I would completely forgotten what I was talking about. But we're going to test this out.
You went off on all kinds of a tangent.
Because everybody's been talking about a Zelda Maker because we got the Mario Maker. And so I feel like this was just kind of that test, but they should have put it online so people could have played other people's dungeons.
Agreed.
So really, they kind of lost out on that opportunity. But like I said, comparing it to the Wii U, which I was originally trying to do before I forgot the whole fucking concept that I was trying to point out.
We've never lost our thread.
Yeah, I think they're just they just want to give people a little taste and say, hey, let's see how this idea works. But overall, I mean, just absolutely loved the game. Loved playing it. It was so much fun. The colors. And what I loved is, and I'm always going back and forth on remakes. Do I want them to be really different, or do I want them to be almost exactly the same, or do I want a good middle ground? And this game, I think, hit it perfectly. Ocarina of Time 3D, I think that's a little bit too similar to Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask 3D, I think that's way too different from the original Majora's Mask.
Boss fights.
Yeah, I think this Link's Awakening remake hit that perfect middle ground where there were some things that were different, but it, for the most part, stuck to the original. So I did really appreciate that. Is there anything else that you want to say on the remake?
No, I mean, just it did throw me back. For you said it only threw you back 5 years. For me, it threw me back literally to the mid 1990s of just, it's been a favorite game of mine for as long as I've played video games, basically. It was one of the very first games that I replayed over and over and over again. So getting to go back and replay it like this in a brand new art style, but everything still was so faithful to the original in terms of the world, the dungeons, the bosses. All they changed really was the art style. Yeah. And they added the Dungeon Maker, which, like we said, whatever. But other than that, the remastered
You lost the photo booth, though.
We did lose the photo booth, but I was like, whatever. Some people were pissed about it. Some people were pissed about it, and I get that. You don't like losing a feature when you have a remake.
They put Crazy Tracy in both games, so I was happy.
Hey, Crazy Tracy loved putting that salve on you that brought you back to life. So.
Man, once again, just a really fun podcast episode, man. Just kind of going back to two guys playing Zelda. That's how we started. So these Zelda episodes, and we will do more Zelda episodes, but it's always kind of fun getting back talking Zelda because we did for so long, but that's also kind of why we quit doing Two Guys Playing Zelda, because we talked Zelda for so long. So it's kind of nice to talk about other games and then talk about a Zelda game. So a ton of fun. But Red, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode. All the links for this will be in the description, but you can support us on Patreon or PayPal. And if you can't support us financially, please leave a review or a rating. It helps out with our rankings on different podcast platforms. And we have merchandise on our websites. Two Guys Play. I'm not going to mention that. That's outdated. That's outdated. Go to tgpcgaming.com. We have all kinds of video game merchandise on there. And that is an affiliate shop, so we may earn a commission on purchases through our links. Red, talk about some of the other stuff we got going on.
Well, we're on YouTube. We have TGPZ Gaming, and we also have Two Guys Playing Zelda, where we really got our start. And like we said, it has felt good to get back to talking about Zelda. We burned out on it for a little while, so we don't have a lot of new content up on Two Guys Playing Zelda, but we've got that and TGPZ Gaming. We're on Discord now, and man, that is a fun place. Like, we have channels, we have general gaming, but then we have Nintendo, Xbox, Sony, PlayStation. We talk sports, we talk booze, we talk TV shows. Like, we talk a lot of fun stuff.
Come have a beer with us, everybody, gamers.
Absolutely. It's a very fun place. Just the Discord's where we really like having our video game conversations now. We are still on social media, though. We're on Twitter and on Instagram at Busted Buttons PC. But I gotta say, this was a very special podcast for me. I enjoyed talking about one of my all-time favorite nostalgia trips. If you've ever heard me talk about Link's Awakening, you know how much I love it and how much it throws me back to being that kid, going on road trips with the family, sit in the back seat with the Game Boy. And just, to me, this felt very special. So, any idea what we're doing next week? Are we getting back to
we're just talking the gaming industry, and I know you all seen us lately. Like, we kind of gaming industry, then we did a game, then gaming industry, then we did a game. We don't really have any pattern. We kind of just go on how we feel at the time. I say next week we talk about the gaming industry, kind of see what's all going on, or maybe just randomly we'll do another retro episode. We don't know.
You never know.
But gaming industry next week, and then from there, or not next week. You can't say that because our schedule is so crazy. We can't do it every week. We'd love to. Never works out. And then sometimes we got to take a 6-week break. But anyways, next episode, we will just talk the gaming industry, and we will see you all on that next episode.